I'm thinking about creativity with two main approaches in mind. And the one is dualism, or objects in opposition, or elements in opposition to each other, like life and death, man and woman, organic, geometric. Different elements that stand in opposition to each other, but not necessarily. And aspect of Darwinism. In many ways, being creative is like having a baby, and I learned at architect school, it's a metaphor. So, when you create this new thing, which you believe it's new at least, and you have this good process around its feeling, its emotion, it's staying up late all night, it's doing crazy things, whatever, to get to a place where you actually feel like it's something that's new, innovative, revolutionary. It's a process of trial and error. And I would compare this to Darwinism, where you, in a brave new world, you will bottle people. People will be born in bottles. Or if you watch Netflix, you have this creation of humans, different types of humans, A, B, C levels, and they were created in labs. I would compare creativity to that, even though the metaphor might be ethically not nice. We're not talking about real humans here. We're talking about creating a new product, a new service, something that's doing something different for the world. And to do that, you need trial and error, you need repetition, you need to develop one idea, develop the next and the next and the next and the next. And then you go and evaluate, and you figure out your first idea was probably quite good, but you learn something from the other elements as well, and then you start a new process, and it's going in loops, and you will never be satisfied. The baby will never be good enough. And that's also an aspect, when to stop. Because you can innovate forever. At some point you have to stop. Funds runs out, or you don't have the energy to do it anymore, or I don't know. Timing is very essential. Having the right baby at the right time. Both for the process, but then of course also for the market, where it comes into evaluation if this is something actually people want or need. Maybe it's too innovative. Maybe it's something that the market doesn't want to live in 30 years. Or maybe it's so innovative that it revolutionizes the whole industry, like the Kodak case with digital cameras. So you don't really know the outcome. You can't predict that. And you don't even know if the product is or the service is going to work. What you know is that you're hopefully doing something innovative that you can check up against the existing market, and then you don't know the market response. But looking back at the process again, where you have the creation, you're putting different elements together. It could be opposites, it could be something different, it could be something that's similar to each other. But then you have a process where you create some kind of, let's call it life, something that is going, it's working, it's supposed to be the result of the creative process, and you see it from different angles where you hopefully will go somewhere, and it will go somewhere. But you don't know. There's a lot of hopes up. And then you have to do all these different iterations, as we call it. It's different processes where you repeat the same process with small variations. And this is where I find it very interesting in the creative process, because this is nothing different than what you could do with a computer, I believe. You could line up very many of these different iterations and variations. And then as a human, you could focus on the evaluation. If it's a good idea, is it a good concept? Is it creative at all? Is it just dumb or dull? Is it something that's done? All those things. And we can have a computer that can also know a lot about those things with a database, and you can run it up against different databases to see, let's say patents, let's say trademarks, let's say stuff like that, design trademarks, design registrations. I mean, stuff like that where you can actually see if it is something that already exists. But then you have a whole market that isn't in those databases, but is just alive on its own, and it's what it is. It's something that others are buying because they need it and there's a market for it. So you could do some of this by computer, but human interaction is essential to evaluate. So we can set up these processes where you have initial idea, you know somewhere of the direction you want. Maybe you work for a diary and you want products that includes dairy products because that's what you have a lot of. Or you want something else. Maybe you don't even know what you want. Maybe you just want something that's creative. Maybe actually into the art process where everything is about being creative and not the result. The process is maybe even more important. So I found this very interesting to look at the different aspects of these processes where creativity is not something you can really measure, but you can observe it. And the best part of all is random. Because in all of this, it's a lot of randomness. You can put something together, 1 + 1 = 1, and the result of that process is hilarious, or it just makes sense, or it's just something that people love it, or I don't know. It's so many examples of that where it doesn't make a rational sense in a process way, but it just comes in as a random element. I think this is also something we could work with in a more engineering way, to have a parallel process with randomness that is linked together with the overall process, as I explained with opposites and Darwinism, but randomness is coming in there as some seeds or some salt that gives nutrition to the process. And we could structure this, and I'm working on this model on how this could be more computerized, because I think that is one of the key elements for this century to solve that. It's believed, at least, that that's what humans are going to live out of in the future, but I don't see that. I don't think people at all will really be creative. At some level, yeah, maybe. You will always have the analog, which is blooming again, and that's great. And you will have people who love wilderness, and you will have people who really are like in bed with nature. And that's great. We need all of that, because that's input to the other process, which is more engineering-like. It's more like a hard, dead process. So you need life and death. And I'm now talking about the computer, something dead, even though it isn't. It's hard. It's not organic-like. It's more like a rock compared to a tree or something. And we need all of that. And I think for the future, where we're going ahead, this is going to be essential, that we can crack the code of creativity, we can solve it in a rational way, and we can figure out what we don't figure out. So, because then you already done a lot. If you have a process and you know that this is partly good, but we're missing something, and if you know what you're missing, then you can work with that. Being human, do what humans can do best, and give input to the other rational process. I think evaluation is the key. We can run the computer for putting different ideas together, like indefinitely, and they can spit out so many different variations and variables in a data set. But then it will be an overload for the human to process, and it won't end with anything. So we have to be more structured about it and figure out actually how this thing is supposed to